So let's act together. Preserve our democracy. God bless you all. May God protect our troops. Thank you.
You have been watching President Joe Biden speaking to the nation for the first time since dropping out of the 2024 presidential race.
We have our political analyst, Ron Dozauer, with us now. Ron, there's a lot to talk about here.
Boy.
I want to start just with that opening message that President Biden said he's not running for re-election because he's putting country above his own ambition. And he really stressed, even though he has insisted he's not too old to do the job, but he said it's time for a new generation.
Yeah, I thought that language is passing the torch, the new generation, not only in reference to Kamala Harris, but maybe in reference to Kamala's opponent, in terms of a new generation needs to lead our democracy. And so that was what he did kind of throughout the conversation tonight with the American public, is he did a number of things. One, he was able to talk about his legacy. Number two, he was able to put Ms. Harris in a really positive light. And he used language like dictator and tyrant without mentioning her opponent's name, but certainly a direct reference to, in his opinion, Donald J. Trump.
Question I've got for you, Ron, is how do you think the rest of the world views the United States of America right now, seeing the President of the United States bow out of a presidential race just days after he said he was going to stay in this thing, and then changes the tune just like that, passes the torch to Vice President Kamala Harris, didn't immediately endorse her, then came out and endorsed her. Now we've got a presidential live address from the Oval Office stating this. How do you think other world leaders are viewing us right now? We just had 2 Chinese bombers buzz the Alaska coastline today, and I know this happens from time to time, but how do people view us right now?
Warily. What they're doing is they're taking a good, everybody's really watching us right now, because this has been tumultuous for everyone in the world, not just for the political dynamics that's going on in the United States. I think that transition to the new candidate so quickly has helped ease a little bit of the anxiety. But certainly our friends and our allies, as well as our folks that would rather see us not succeed, we are under a microscope on the rest of the world right now. We are being watched very closely and carefully to see what's going to happen come November. And so you're going to see a great deal of interest, and punditry throughout the world is going to be breaking down this presidential election throughout the world. And we'll see all that going on every single day. So nobody really knows what's going to happen at the end of the day yet, right? It looks like the race is all of a sudden became a little bit more competitive, at least right now. And so, you know, it's a coin toss. We've always said, and I do believe this, at the end of the day, you know, this is going to be a 1, 2, or 3 point race, no matter what, in 6 or 7 key states. And given the Electoral College and the popular vote, that's where this is going to break. And so how those dynamics have changed in those states is yet to be determined. But Kamala has certainly created a buzz. So we'll see what happens. And the rest of the world, as you say, is watching as well.
How do you think President Biden sounded tonight? Everyone has been really carefully watching his performance in public speaking ever since that debate. We do know he was just recovering from COVID. Do you think the way he sounded tonight underlined perhaps making the right decision to hand the torch off to Vice President Harris, or did he come across sounding like the strong leader that people want to hear from their president?
Well, you know, the recent research in the last 24 hours has shown that the American public is really supportive of his decision to leave and not pursue re-election. They're also very supportive of him spending the next 6 months in office to execute and to carry out. He articulated a long list of agenda items. None of them are going to require sort of legislative action, because that's not going to happen. But he will, through the pulpit, he'll still have as president to be able to articulate some of those issues. And I think you're going to see him, you know, to the extent possible, be very strong voice in the campaign. I've said to a few folks that, you know, in some respects, he may actually now be a better campaigner than candidate. Now, we'll see how that works out. I think it'll be strategically located and so forth. And I thought generally tonight he executed pretty well. I mean, the voice is still weakened, a little halting, but not as bad as during the debate. Right. And I guess I'm going to say that the teleprompter probably helped a little bit. But he delivered the messages that we expected him to deliver, which was about legacy, why he got out of the race. He's willing to sacrifice his political ambition of sorts for what needs to be done in America, and passing the torch, as you mentioned, is a central piece of that. And again, I thought he did a nice job of doing a contrast with the opposition without ever mentioning the name. It's something we talked about in an earlier broadcast.
Right. Would he say Donald Trump's name?
Would he say Donald Trump's name? And the answer was, no, I didn't think he would, and he didn't. But he certainly made a number of oblique references to Mr. Trump throughout the course of his speech.
You know, Ron, I found something interesting in the speech when President Biden talked about the Americans being held all around the world. Something I found also very interesting this week is when Benjamin Netanyahu arrived in Washington, D.C. and was not greeted by Biden or Vice President Kamala Harris. And today, many Democrats boycotted his speech, some calling it the worst speech, including Nancy Pelosi, other people not there. Vice President Kamala Harris, Biden going to meet with him later this week, I understand. But at the same time, when he mentioned Americans being held all over the place and different places need to be released, he did not mention Hamas. And that is one crucial element to this. In Washington, D.C. today, we saw some very violent protests from pro-Palestinian protesters out there defacing a lot of different monuments and statues. U.S. Capitol Police had to get involved. And we know this is a very contentious point here when many people are coming out, including local Representative Pramila Jayapal, saying, why was he invited here in the first place? So to not say Hamas and to know how things are kind of going in Washington, D.C. right now as far as how Israel is viewed, do you think that speaks volumes as to where the direction of the country, at least with that kind of leadership, is headed?
Well, he did say, he said one of his objectives in the next 6 months is to get a peace accord in place, okay? And I think he is completely committed to trying to get that done before he leaves office. Whether that'll happen or not, you know, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But I think he has been one of those very strong advocate of the Israeli strengths. And I think he remains as such. I think he is concerned about some of the conduct of the war. And I think we all want to see one thing for sure. We want to see those prisoners released and returned to their families. And I think it sounded, even listening to Netanyahu earlier today, that he's interested in getting this done. He said, as I hear today, we are working on this right now. And fingers crossed and hope runs eternal that maybe we can get some progress here. And so I think the president is going to be engaged with that issue. You know, you're always going to have two sides, always having something to say about whether we should or should not be there and what we should be doing or not be doing. But the overarching issue here is, can we get a resolution? Can we end this war? Can we return those hostages to their families? And I think everybody, Democrats, Republicans, independents, libertarians, we all want the same thing. We want those families reunited, and we really want to see an end to this conflict. And
being part of brokering it could be a great part of a legacy for an outgoing president.
Again, legacy, as we saw, this thematic throughout the evening was about legacy. It really was.
Ron, thanks so much. It's always great to have you here.